It's on the internet. It's on your website. So we are being so proactive that we're going to raise rates to replace pipeline 300 years ahead of everyone else. In addition, to request that citizens have to get 9,500 protest letters that are very detailed and specific, it's not like a petition, and submit those to you to try to stop you from doing this to us. It would only take 7,700 signatures to recall our mayor.
Yep.
And we have 120
Whoa!
You get no special election for water, no vote. Memorial Park, no vote. Redistricting, no vote. Fire department, no vote. And no one should vote for any one of these people besides Janice Elliott ever again. Thank you.
Is Marjorie Michaels.
It looks like Miss Stone's a little uncomfortable. She should be.
I read in the paper that Governor Brown wants to tax our water. Okay, so you guys are going to raise our water rates. Government always gets what it wants. But I was hoping that you could split out the portion of our increase that's for repairs and maintenance. Because maybe we'll just get taxed on our water consumption.
I'm back because this is exciting to see citizens rising up against the tax hike perversions.
And I asked how much of our water is being sold to other municipalities, and I was told we don't do that all the time, which I consider not to be an answer. Now, the other thing is, I would like to know a straight answer. How much of the funds for the water department will be going towards underfunded pensions?
Yep.
What is the percentage that will be going towards underfunded pensions? I would hope that portion would not also be taxed by Governor Brown. Okay, unlike the government, residents do not have an unlimited source of income. Thank you.
Ms. Michaels is Terry D.
Thank you, April and Barbara. We were deprived of our right to speak on oral comments on number 9, and I'd like my extra 3 minutes back, please. That allows you to speak to all items on the agenda, and you're limiting us to only this public hearing, to which we have a right to speak anyway, as per your rules. You have repeatedly told us over the last, well, as long as any of you have been on the council, that we are so broke, and we know that it's from unfunded pension liabilities, benefits for the police and the fire and management, like Thuvenol, getting that 9,000 extra tip a month. So, first you sell off all our assets, and over half of our tax increase, all without a vote.
Whoa.
You pass that illegal property tax without a vote of the people based on fraudulent label of annexation to that little district out there in the middle of the desert. And now you want to increase the cost of life-giving water. Because we saved our water. Because we saved our water, you're deeming it necessary for us to have a water increase. And we know that someone put trichloroethylene in one of the wells. If we have such a good police department, why don't they go out and find out who did that and get some money out of the corporation that's poisoning our water supply? And we also know that you've been stealing or borrowing from the water fund for years.
Whoa.
And we already have to pay twice for the water. First, as people that were citizens of the city of Upland, we paid for every water structure all that time, one time. And then when you decided, not you guys, but the city council, under Rob and Aquanetta, decided that we needed to put it in a different fund, then you said that we owed that money to the fund, so you had to increase the water rates to pay back the city for those costs. Did you make the improvements at that time? It's just, someone wants to know how long these improvements have been needed, and how much are you paying this guy? This corporation will come in and stick up stuff that nobody can follow. It's all just excuses for this water rate increase, which because we're broke because of unfunded pension liabilities, which you won't get to that important point. Now I want to say one more thing, and that is, if we are so broke, then how in the world are you going to pay for us to join a lawsuit to fight the state of California? We know how successful your $1 million of lawsuits was to get rid of that marijuana guy, when you were all the time in bed with Mr. Wilty and the porn king, okay? So all the...
Marjorie, you're off subject. If you want to talk about water, you can talk about water. We're not talking about SB 54. No, you cannot. Marjorie.
I've been a lawyer for 37 years.
Marjorie. Marjorie, your time is up. Thank you very much. Will you please be seated?
I still want the lawsuit. I still want the lawsuit.
Hi. I had a question. Thinking about all these workshops with the waters and so on. The question came to mind. Has the city done its due diligence to notify residents that are, when I'm talking with my neighbors, they have no idea what's going on. So, to collect petitions that they can turn in, they don't know what's going on.
Well, they should speak English. How long have you lived in this country?
So they're really at a disadvantage and or being taken advantage
Seriously.
of, which I see a disturbing cycle, because thinking back to the fire annexation, the citywide parking, what happened in Memorial Park, they have no idea because their first language is not English.
Not too bad.
And so I was wondering, has the city done its due diligence to reach out to people in my community? Yeah, I don't see that.
Tough.
I'm not getting answers from my resident neighbors.
Oh, they moved this. They switched the camera because of the sign.
So that's just something I wanted to ask. Thank you.
Very cool. Okay. After Ms. Brenneman is Cleet Driver.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I don't think I'm going to be very popular here tonight. I was irate, really irate, when I heard they were going to raise the water rates. And I thought, okay, I cannot shoot from the hip. I need to find out the facts. And I went to both workshops. We are where we are right now. You can't go back and fix what has happened in the past. It is here, it is now. If you want water, we have no other choice but to let the city council approve this. So, one of those tanks, like they said, go, we have no water in Upland. Then we only have ourselves to blame. So, thank you for letting me take a few minutes, and it took a lot of courage for this city council to address this issue where past city councils have not.
After Mr. Driver is Justin Cadso.
Good evening. When I heard about the water rates, I really wasn't happy at all. It doesn't serve me well because I have a pool, all right, and I have a quarter lot, so I have like 5 areas to water, and you can understand what my water bill is already at, especially with the pool. And summer coming, and the evaporation level goes up as compared to the winter. So when I got the notice in the mail, I came in, and I want to thank Janet for taking the time. She really brought me up to speed on everything. And Rosemary's done a fantastic job in Public Works. Everybody should know that. This woman works very hard. I've watched her over the year since I moved up there. She does a fantastic job. People need to know that. And I've walked that reservoir with Rosemary and her team and Councilmember Carol Tim. All right, and that thing is a disaster. I mean, the cement, you can actually go up and peel it off. It's so bad. The rebar is already rusting. Water is coming from the bottom and the top and down the sides. Not in just one area, but around the entire reservoir. So if you haven't gone out there, you better go out there because it's a natural disaster.
How do we see it?
All right, you can go right up there and take a look at it. Make an appointment. I'm sure Rosemary will open the gate for you. And I did that.
She doesn't
Okay?
return calls, she doesn't answer
Okay,
emails.
so
Excuse me, please.
we need to understand the totality of the hazard that's here because that whole neighborhood is going to get wiped out if it's not addressed and it's not fixed or replaced. It's beyond repair. The repair that's on there is already starting to leak. All right, that's how bad the reservoir issue is. My encouragement is, okay, I will support you on this, even though it's going to cost me money.
Yeah.
I'm well educated, income person. All right, and I will support you on this. What I want to let you know is I've let Carol Tim know and Gino Felipe and Mayor Stone that there is, and I'm sure the city manager knows about this as well, there is money available for us from the federal government through the EPA. And we work diligently trying to find this money at a lower rate. State is very, very generous, giving us 1.8, right? The federal government will give us 0.5% and a better finance program. Now we're looking at 14 million in interest with the state, and we're looking at maybe half of that with the federal government. I would like to see this city council come together and put a 7-year water plan program, a vision statement, what needs to be done in the entire state, entire city, and put it in this proposal for the EPA for a loan. Now we do have a short window on this. It's due by July 6th. The EPA just announced 2 weeks ago there's $11 billion available. I'm not saying get $11 billion. What I'm saying is get what we need at a 1.5, put a 7 or 10 year vision together, tell the EPA we'll pay it back in that 7 years after we finish our project. That gives us time to save our money up, go back, drop a bunch on the EPA, and petition the federal forgiveness program. I don't know if you know this, there's a federal forgiveness program that's out there that they will forgive up to 50% of what you owe them. All right? Yeah. And I know this because I used to work for the federal government. All right, well, thank you.
Did you work for ICE?
After Mr. Kadzo is William Getz.
Hi, I'm going to make this real simple. The 60% increase you're asking for is ridiculous and it's wrong. You haven't looked at all the options. I went to both workshops. Basically, you got option A and option A being called B. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. And you want us to pay 60% more. And this is after you sold the fire department. You didn't annex it. You sold it because we didn't get a vote. We didn't get a say. You sold it. This is after you sold part of the city.
You contract with the county now?
You didn't get a say in it. You didn't even put Memorial Park on the thing. It was just an address so no one would find out. This is after you've asked for increases for special projects, for building things that we didn't really want. And now you're asking us to pay 60% more for water. This is absolutely ridiculous. It's wrong. And any idiot with a calculator could tell this. Fortunately, I can get all of you a calculator. I'm happy to do that. Then Kelly, I apologize because you're the only decent person up here.
Ouch. Wow.
After Mr. Getz is John Walford.
Yes, hi. My name is Bill Getz. I've got a couple things. I did go to one of the workshops, and the city of Upland owns about 70% of San Antonio Water Company, right? Yes. And when I asked you that at one of the workshops, you said all that money goes back into the San Antonio Water Company, the 1.4 million. Yeah. But we all probably, a lot of us buy stocks. We get dividends. Doesn't the city of Upland get any dividends from that 1.4 million? They get none?
San Antonio Water Company hasn't issued a dividend in years.
Okay, all right, well, then that answers that one. The other thing is when I bought my house in Upland, a long time ago. It was brand new. It was zoned for a half-acre lot. So I said, okay, this is nice. So I take care of it. Now, what I would like to know, since we're going to have a close to right around 57–60% increase, can you rezone my lot so I can build high-density housing like we did over on 11th Street, over on 15th Street, up on Baseline?
Yeah.
Can we do that? Can I put 4 or 5 houses on my lot now?
Yeah.
Will you let it? Because you guys zoned it that way. Not you, but the city of Upland did. And I would, you know, in the summertime, my water bill's huge. And you're gonna make it almost double of what I pay now. Is that a thought? Anybody can answer?
No, sir, we can't answer at this time.
No.
Oh, Lord, I didn't realize how crazy it was in this town.
The other thing, you said the average increase is gonna be $22? Well, does that include all the apartments and everybody else? Is that everybody that's got a water meter?
That's the typical bill, so that's the average single-family user. So it's the most common bill. We'll see a $20 increase.
What?
Yeah, so apartments would likely be more because they use much more than the average household.
Apartments use more than the average 1/4 acre or a half-acre lot?
Assuming an individual apartment will use less, but the entire complex, which is what it was built under, will use more. So they're not a typical 34 CCS customer.
Do most apartments have their own water meter, or is it just 1 meter?
They're typically master metered, so 1 meter for the entire complex in most cases.
Well, anyhow, I think it's crazy, and I think you should take my position and let us break our lots and sell them. What can we do to pursue that? Somebody give me an answer.
No.
And apply for a zone change and a general plan change if you think you want to do that.
So we can keep paying you.
I think we all should.
everything?
Well, then, you're right to make the application.
All right, thank you.
After Mr. Walford is Ralph Cavallo.
Hi, I'm John Wolford. I've been a resident of Upland here since 1974, so
wow.
I've seen some changes over time with
44 years.
Our council and leadership in the community. I attended the workshops, and I came with an open mind and would like to have thought that I was attending something on the order of maybe a town hall meeting opposed to being spoon-fed. The slideshow on the stats in terms of why we are where we are, what it's going to take to get out of the predicament and so forth and so on. And one of the things that I had heard passed around and I asked about was the potential to a sales tax to fund some part of this improvement to the reservoir. And said, no, we did a poll, and that it was not popular. It did not go over. And I thought, well, poll this audience and see how many people here would raise their hand to say we would support the agenda item the way it's written, or would there be an alternative, maybe like a sales tax or some other creative way to fund this other than to push it onto the ratepayer. I see the undercurrent or the thread in this weaves back and forth. It's the Jerry Brown approach to the solution to our problem. Basically, let's just charge more for what we're selling less of. And the same thing applies with, somebody mentioned the gas tax, which I think is should be recalled.
Yes.
But point would be, I believe that we're creative enough and have enough talent here that we can fund this without pushing it onto the ratepayer, or maybe not as much on the ratepayer. But Mr. Felipe, I'd like to know, what's the impact of this to San Antonio Water Company in terms of that improvement on 16th up there? Is there a benefit to San Antonio Water Company?
Well, the benefit to San Antonio Water Company is that they happen to own that piece of property, which fits our hydraulic requirements, so it's fortunate that it's still vacant. But we're gonna purchase that property from them at appraised value.
Okay.
So they get some revenue for the property sale.
So, but the idea of having the new reservoir with a treatment component is of no benefit to San Antonio Water Company?
It's really a replacement of what exists today.
Okay, so it's not an upgrade to whatever we're doing to treat water there, it's just gonna be something that's less likely to have the catastrophic failure.
It will meet all current construction codes of today.
Okay, that raises another question in terms of the property that the existing reservoir is on now. What becomes of that? Is it going to be demolished, leveled, developed some way? Or?
We don't know at this point in time. When we actually have the replacement reservoir in service, then we can take the other reservoir out of service and do some further assessments on it. But
My thought was, and it occurred to me, you know, as this meeting was approaching, is that if we put the new reservoir together and we can empty the other reservoir, we could do whatever retrofitting and improvement may be there to, instead of a 7.5 million gallon capacity, we have 15. Would that hit the radar anywhere in terms of being practical?
we would have to study and see if that's appropriate.
We're not trading another hole in the ground for another piece of property, though. I guess that's the direct question. Does that property revert back to San Antonio Water Company, or is it still property of Upland?
Beyond 3 minutes.
It's property of the city of Upland.
Okay. The reliance on Metropolitan Water District water, I think, is a horrible idea. If we could divorce ourselves from that dependence, having two reservoirs, there might be a way to get there. I think I'd like to be reassured that none of what we've talked about with the rate increases over the time that there goes to pensions and unfunded liabilities.
All of the revenue that's generated through the rate adjustment stays within the water fund, which pays for all the expenses associated with the water activities. So if there is some staffing that is utilized under the water fund, they would have to pay for the pensions out of the water fund.
Okay.
For those individuals.
Time's up. Thank you for your leadership.
After Mr. Cavallo is Steve Carvalho.
Hi, Ralph Cavallo. I've lived in this community for 47 years. And my speech won't be popular. I mean, it's always popular to say we shouldn't have done this, we shouldn't have done that. We can't go back in time. The last time I checked, Elizabeth Montgomery is still not alive. So we can't wiggle our nose and say we should have done this, and this council was not here when a lot of these decisions in the past were made. So we can't undo those. We have to live with the lady about 3 speakers ago was speaking, and she's correct. We have to live with the now. I will say this, I used to be head of the claims department for Southern California Edison Company. And nothing's wrong until it's wrong. I mean, nobody's going to complain about water or the facilities until there's a failure. And then everybody will say, wait a minute, you guys knew you should have repaired that. My street you should have repaired, even though you might have had to repair 50 streets. And that's the problem. As far as I'm concerned, we should be charging $22. We should get this thing fixed. These small fixes don't help. Now, I know we've got this $16.5 million project, and I think the city is working with the EPA. But I think Rosemary did not want to address that because it's not done. So while that gentleman was very informed, and I believe he was, there are people working on that. These people work very hard, and they get very little credit. All we get is what you haven't done, what you should have done. We can recall you. You can do all those things. We're in America, people. You do what you want. But the bottom line is you pay for your mistakes. If we don't fix this stuff now, when there's a failure, you're going to hear about it. So my recommendation is you pass this. I know we've got 200 and something. There's 75,000 people in this town. Not everybody feels that way. They want the security of water. Water is now and will forever be the most important thing in our lives. Keep in mind, if you don't think you can do without water, it's real easy. Go out to the street, and there's a little lever, and shut it off, and try to live with it about a few days. That's the problem. We need water, and we need to do it. And as far as changing from this to that, these people are geniuses compared to people in here. As far, and me, as far as comparing what you need to do. Don't you think they're trying to figure out what to need to do? You think they want to come here and get berated all the time? Of course not. So my recommendation is pass the new water rates.
Okay.
Thank you.
Decide we're going to do.
Amen. Amen.
And once again, you invited us here to talk about it. It's going to be a vote. It should be a vote of the people who pay the bill, not you people sitting there. It should be on the ballot where it belongs in a democratic country, and that's what I'd like to see. Thank you.
Next is John Hawthorne.
Yeehaw.
Come on, John. Kelly?
How you doing? Good evening, everybody. Thanks for coming. It's a good, important thing to come get involved with your city. The city of Upland's putting through this tax. You have no votes on this kind of stuff. They're taking away your constitutional right. There's a 2/3 majority vote. Push to get that on everything. Also, I heard a lot of questions about San Antonio Water. San Antonio Water sells the water to Upland at a lower rate, so we do benefit that. But another thing that's happening is the city of Upland owns over 60% of all the stocks. Those stocks are worth about $10,000 to $14,000 a share. Wow. As a suggestion, I say city of Upland sells those stocks back to the San Antonio Heights residents, create some income, build one of these wells. It'd be a good way. They're working on taking over San Antonio Water. Mark my words. If you hear anything to do with LAFCO, that ties into the takeover. LAFCO's bad. San Antonio Heights were taken over recently on it. So watch your news, listen, get involved, vote them off.
I don't have any additional cards on the public hearing.
Thank God.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, so we will close the public hearing.
Or wait, I think we might have one speaker that wasn't accounted for.
I filled out a card. For the water rate? Yeah, she did. For the water rate? Go ahead.
Oh, we're gonna see fireworks.
Is there someone else that's filled out that didn't get their name called? If you want to come forward, you can go up after.
Thank you for taking me. I did fill out a card. It was on 2 issues. I'm a resident of Upland, and I also teach a class called Hustle and Flow, all about California water policy. And you know, I've really learned a lot in the past 4 or 5 years teaching, because my say is probably not going to be very popular, but there's a couple of things. As we move forward, there was just a study put out recently by UCLA climate scientists. In the coming years, we're going to see more droughts and more floods. That's something, whether we like it or not, is probably happening. How are we going to deal with that? We have to think about water resilience. We do not want to be depending on imported water. There's all kinds of things that could happen. We might have a catastrophic earthquake above 7.0 up in the Bay Delta. That means the state water project goes down. We'll have seawater coming into that. Southern California is going to be severely impacted. No. We're very, very fortunate to live in the city of Upland because we have a huge portion of our water coming from groundwater. But as we've heard, and this is the case, many of you know this used to be lemon orchards, oranges. The Lemon Festival is coming up. There's nitrates in that water that has to be treated. Regardless of what we want in terms of our paycheck, this or our pocketbook, water is life. It's a non-substitutable resource. As the gentleman before me said, if you turn off the water, there's not very far. We're not going to be able to get very far in terms of survival. Yeah. I want safe water, I want reliable water, I want quality water. That means we're going to have to think about it, not just for ourselves, but for our children and for our grandchildren. Fiscal manager, and now everyone's up in arms. You've got children dying of lead poisoning. We don't want to be there at that point saying, why didn't you do something about it? Why didn't you deal with the 40 million when you could have? Because bloody hell, Flint is dealing with hundreds of millions. So we've got to think about this as a public commodity, a public good, and this is how we treat it. We don't all have private wells in our backyard anymore. And so if you want to live in a city, many of us perhaps don't, but this is kind of the system we're in right now. We've got to deal with the current situation. And here's the last point, I think, for all city councilors. Moving forward, this idea of conservation is becoming a way of life.
Oh.
Right? That is just something we're going to have to think about in California, especially in Southern California.
Gary.
And the way we deal with water right now, it depends on
Get rid of the illegals.
More, and that funds O&M, operations and maintenance, as well as these capital
Deport the illegal
projects.
aliens.
But moving forward, we're probably going to have to think about using less and still paying for O&M and capital expenditures. Those two things are fundamentally in contradiction,
We should bring
and
that
that is
up.
something all residents are going to have to grapple with.
Shameful.
I know I live in Upland, I love my neighbors. For them, the green lawn is the aesthetic, the way to go. But we also have to move away from perhaps thinking about what is a beautiful landscape. We can think about xeriscaping, we can think about succulents. It's just a cultural shift in relation to how we live in this place that we've all come to call home. Thank you for your work. There's a lot more that needs to happen, both in terms of public education and engagement around this. And I think the city can set an example.
Because we little people are so stupid, right?
Parkways and the landscape you have, and thinking about removing turf and thinking about how do you model resilience in terms of your own action as well as your own landscaping. Thank you.
Was it 5 minutes?
I think it's 5 minutes.
The lady who just spoke, what was her name? Did we get her card?
Crazy.
Can I get your name?
Illegal.
It's in your hand. Her name is Dennis 21.
Her name is Cultural Marxism. Her name is Jerry Brown Jr.
Oh.
Her name is Yo Mama.
Good evening, Council. Boy, I'm going to be just full of cliches tonight. And one of them is that the devil can cite scripture for his own purpose. And we saw the slideshow, and it was really nice, but to me, it did lack some information. I'm hearing one side of the story. I think there are more things that can be done to our water situation in town. Obviously, there has to be. We keep on building. Why? Why are all these places going up? Why are we, as residents, and I've been a 34-year resident of Upland, why do I have to pay 66% more for my water? I've heard as much as 66% more, but at least, we all know, we're going to agree, it's at least 55% more over the years. Why is it that some of these housing developments, are these developers that are building, why don't they contribute to all this stuff?
Yeah, that's right.
Can we build these things? The other thing I would say, my other little cliche here is, you know, you do control the water, you do control the people. And I think we all agree on that. Put it this way.
Whiskey's for drinking, water's for fighting.
I can't live in California anymore. I'm getting taxed to death. What Jerry Brown has done to us with our vehicle taxes, our gas taxes, it's simple if I tell you what I paid to register my '89 Bronco and my 1990 Bronco and my 2003 pickup truck this year, which didn't even amount to how much I paid for my new pickup truck. Okay, yes, I'm an ecological disaster. I drive trucks. But then again, I'm supporting all the gas taxes. So you California taxpayers are paying, I'm helping you out with the road situation. It's not benefiting me. So we did that. We have the whole annexation issue with the fire department that I'm paying extra money for. So between the state and the city of Upland and this water increase, I did buy property in Arizona, and I'm looking forward to it. Now let me tell you about my property in Arizona here, because you know drastic time does call for drastic measures. That's why we're looking at getting out. But let me tell you about my property in Williams, Arizona. The city of Williams, Arizona is pretty barren when it comes to water. They had to hire an oil drilling company to dig 3,700 feet to hit an aquifer, just for city water. Even with that cost of that construction to bring city water, it's cheaper than what you're going to be charging here in Upland. Now, my property in Williams, Arizona, is out of the city proper, so I can't dig a well because a well for me would again hire an oil drilling company and dig 3,700 feet. So me as a homeowner can't afford to do that. So how am I going to get water to my new house? Everybody out there has water cisterns, 2,500 gallons, 5,000 gallons. You can get a 10,000 gallon one, depending on how much water you use. There's a Northern Arizona water company that you can go get your water. They will deliver the water to you to fill up your cistern at 4 cents a gallon.
Wow.
Okay, to fill out your water, to fill up your water cistern.
We'll do the math on
I compared that to my Upland water now, and it's it's less. I can go pick up water in Williams, Arizona if I get like a water cistern for my pickup truck, and a lot of people do. They have these trailers and they have these water things on there. Yeah. And they'll go buy water at 1.5 cents to 2 cents a gallon if they go pick it up themselves and dump it into their cistern themselves. I am doing that. Okay, I just can't believe these rates are very unfair for us. I understand. Now, the other gentleman that spoke up here about getting grants, can't we find a grant? There has to be a California state grant. There has to be federal grants. Let's look into other means of paying for this other than constantly coming to us.
Yeah.
Okay? The taxpayers and residents who have lived here. We can't afford to do it anymore. You know, there's other people to charge other than Tom, Richard, and Sharon, okay? Or whoever in the city. So thank you for your time, and I look forward to, you know, putting a little more time into this vote tonight and thinking maybe there's some out-of-the-box thinking or financing or something other than we can do with this bill, at least to reduce the amount of the increase or just a percentage of the increase to the property owners. You know, I could see maybe 20%, but I'm telling you, 66%, as high as 66% is ridiculous. Thank you very much.
Okay, are there any others? No. Okay, so we will close the public hearing. Carol, you want to start?
Yes, I have questions. There's a lot of questions here. First of all, there's a young lady that came up and asked if we sent anything in other languages when we send out these responses. I know it's probably Spanish and English, or what is it?
In our case, we sent out English notice.
English only? Is there any way in the future we could have
No.
Spanish?
No.
Okay, let's keep it down.
English.
And be fair. We listen to everyone else.
We certainly
Hell
could
no.
do that in the future, but we did not do it as part
Okay.
of this.
My question is or my statement.
How about
so,
Armenian?
First of all, what is
How about
the
Armenian?
height for 5 years?
How about Hungarian?
We
You
have
got it.
diversity here. We said 60%.
Ridiculous.
We said 57%.
And who's going to pay for that?
What is it? Bottom line. Pierce, do you want to address that, please?
Yes, it's a 54% cumulative.
54%.
Yes.
And why are we going to 17% the first year? There's a reason, correct?
Yes, because we need to fund operations, and if we don't do the 17% in the
They're
first
running
year,
away.
we're not able to meet our bond coverage, and therefore we can't get the cheap SRF loan. So this $16.5 million reservoir project, the primary reason we're doing this initial increase is to show that we have rates sufficient to pay back that loan. And that loan is at a 2.5% interest rate, so it's significantly lower than the existing rate or conventional rate you would get if you issued a bond or went to a commercial paper.
Correct. Now, in dealing with that, the last speaker was up here talking about how we can think out of the box to make this less. And I went to the reservoir with Congressman Pete Aguilar's field rep, Curtis Lewis, and asked him, what can you do to help us in Upland? What can you do? And he did come back. He was the one who came back with a 0.5 cents loan, EPA loan. And so I thus then talked to everyone and said, can we, if we are able to get that loan, it will significantly help us. It's a big difference between a 1 3/4% loan. And everyone that I talked to, including Rosemary and the city manager, said that's something we want to do. And if that decreases the cost to the residents, we will definitely pass that along. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, we're going to pursue the cheapest solution possible.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right. So if we find a loan, and right now, today alone, Rosemary looked at 4 to 5 different funding options, and she's doing research on this constantly to try to lower our cost. If we find a lower cost, we can subsequently, as part of our 218 process that we've outlined, we can always lower the rate, but we can't increase the rate through the course of the next 5 years. So after the first year, if we find additional costs or funding mechanisms to help lower that, we can lower subsequent years thereafter.
Thank you. And so we are pursuing other things in order to lower the rates for the homeowners. That's what we want to do. I own a half an acre, so I understand what it costs for all this water. And my thought was, oh my gosh, this is going to be a huge increase. But one thing that struck me is, I don't know if you remember, but 4 years ago when during the elections, the big thing was don't sell our water. Don't outsource the management of our water. And the city council did not do that, and we will not do it. Water is the most important commodity we have here in Upland. But we do have to take care of our water. You know, there was 9 years where the council did nothing and did not have any water rate increase, not even a little tiny one. And if we'd had those 3% like they normally do, we wouldn't be where we are today. 9 years of doing nothing. And so one thing I've noticed too is back, Rosemary, my question to you is, when did we start putting on every single meeting that we were having emergency problems with our water? Was that March 2016? When was that?
It was October. October
2016. And ever since, we've talked about all the reservoirs that we've been having trouble with and repairing, correct? What is the final amount we've been, how much have we worked on or used thus far on all of those properties?
Oh, I don't know the exact dollar amount. I wasn't prepared to answer that, but you know, we've reported out to the council and stayed within our authorizations the entire time.
Right, but it's been a lot of money that we've been spending out of the water fund for emergency things that are happening. That's why I was so glad when we came out telling people about, when we found out about the reservoir on 17th. But I think as Clete Driver said, I wish you could see them because it is kind of scary. And if we had an earthquake, it would break. And whether it would be go the path that they say, I don't know, but I'm not willing to take that chance. I mean, we need to fix that. No matter what we do, we need to fix it. And we don't want to put it on the backs of the taxpayers, but we want to be able to figure out what can we do. And this is the first plan that we had, was to do it 17%, I believe. Let's see, it's 17%, and then it goes to another 9%. And then 9%, 5%, 3%, 3%.
That's 6 years.
It's actually 5 years.
9 years.
So,
17?
yes.
So our staff report outlines 6 years total. This 218 process is 5 years. So that last 3% you see in the staff report isn't applicable under this action tonight. It would be what we might anticipate doing in year 6, but it's not included as part of this package.
We're raising by 17%
Okay.
in year 6 again.
I have some more questions, if you don't mind. Okay, our water rate schedule. We're going up, we already talked about the 17%. The first year is because of in order to get 125%, we wouldn't be able to get this loan, the state water loan, which we already probably have, if we didn't increase it 17%. Is that correct? Because everybody was saying, gosh, that seemed like too much the first year. Let me go, let's see. Declining water demands happen. Can you go over the demand rates part again? The water demand analysis and why we're doing that?
For the temporary surcharge?
Yes.
So we've established a 5-year rate adjustment. We've made assumptions as to how the city will consume water over that 5-year period. It essentially does not include very much growth in terms of our water demand requirements. But in the event that the state comes back, for example, like the governor did back in 2015 and and mandate that we have to do a reduction, we would know that the community as a whole needs to reduce because the governor has mandated it and there's fines and penalties associated with not
But
doing
illegals
it.
can come into the
So
country.
we would come back to the council with the staff report analyzing, you know, the impact of the governor, for example's direction to the city to make a reduction, and we would identify how much revenue would be lost during that period. We would recommend that you make an adjustment to the rates, a temporary adjustment during that period to provide cost recovery for the reduction in revenue loss.
Okay.
So we would come back and explain that to you at that time.
That would be something you'd have to have a vote of the council to do it, is that correct?
Absolutely. We would have to ask that you pass a resolution.
Are there other cities that are doing this?
Yeah, in fact, last time that the governor did a rate adjustment, I live in the city of Rancho. The city of Rancho Cucamonga's water provider, Cucamonga Valley Water District, was implementing their rate adjustments at that time. They had 10 stages of demand reduction management surcharges, if you will. They went immediately to stage 6, and all residents had to pay that during that period when the governor had mandated their community to reduce water supplies. So they didn't reduce, or they didn't lose the revenue that they expected to run the program. So when the reduction was lifted, they were able to remove that surcharge off of the ratepayers' bills. And we went back to what the established rates were at that time.
Oh, they're not looking to.
So that was an example of a community that had already had those tools implemented in their rate structure and exercised them.
How long was that? Did that go on?
It was several years before the governor declared, you know, we had a big, large rain, and the governor declared California no longer in a drought. And at that time, after that point, they reduced their rates. I don't know exactly what the date was, but they went reduced back, took the surcharge off, took it back to what the established rate level was at that time, the adopted rate along their adopted rate schedule plan. So there still was adjustments that were made because it was whatever the date that they discontinued the use of the surcharge was the rate that they put back into place.
And just clarification, the tiered rates are just for single family?
Yes.
Because the uniform rates are apartments, condos, commercial, industrial, landscape, and schools, is that correct?
And it's usually because those customers are larger volume customers, or they're very, very variable. Like commercial could be a lot of different types of uses. And so it doesn't really fit the mold like single family residential. We're able to adjust the rates, provide a break to single family residential.
I've been asked if there's any way to address the needs of low income or seniors dealing with this. Can they get a low interest loan or programs for the housing department? Something like that would address it so they'd be able to put in things that would help.
We don't have anything like that in place. In fact, the Prop 218 requirements require us to do a rate study analysis that provides for the cost of service. So the customer's impact on the system, they have to pay for it. There's no subsidies allowed under Prop 218 at this time.
Okay, and it wouldn't be allowed like through housing if they wanted to. You know, sometimes you can get low interest loan to help lower the interest rate, like they could get drought tolerant landscaping, low flush toilets, low flow showers, things like that. Is there anything available?
No showers.
Absolutely. The city has a conservation program. We have a staff person, Michelle Madriz, who's available to talk to residents within the community and explain the various programs that the city has that the community residents can take advantage of. And many times they're free or they're subsidized programs where they can implement features that reduce their water use.
Okay. Well, that's all for right now. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Council Rosemary, I'll come back, but Mayor Pro Tem Tim made some interesting questions I want to kind of follow up. And I think some of the speakers shared this concern, maybe it was Brenda was one. Can you talk about water management briefly in our basin, how our region benefits from large wet years, for example, previous year, and our storage programs? Can you touch on that for some of us?
A little bit. Embedded in the cost of the rate structure is our assessments that we pay to groundwater managers, or water masters they call them. They're the arm of the court. But they're required to make sure that the basins are managed effectively and that people don't produce more water than they're entitled to produce without some kind of a replenishment obligation. That as we produce water out of the ground, we don't overproduce it and cause negative impacts like subsidence or fissuring of the ground because we've overdrawn our basin. So all of the basins that we have water rights in are managed basins. And as a part of that, there are improvements that we fund as a region to ensure that when we have large storms, like the woman who mentioned climate change will bring flood and will bring dry spells. During the time when we have water of plenty, we try to capture that water through flood control basins that are also used for groundwater recharge. We can also take, at that time, when water's available through the Metropolitan Water Department, there can be purchased water that is then recharged into the ground and to our piggy bank, if you will. It's like a reserve, and then when we have dry periods, then we can produce our wells and produce that water.
To everybody who came out to the workshops that were held earlier this month, you know, nobody wants increases of any kind. That's pretty obvious. That's just human nature. But there's obviously a clear and immediate need for this. I have a quick question here. Mentioned that there were 267 protest votes received. How many were needed?
Oh, quite a significant amount of customers would be needed to meet the
9,500.
Yeah, to meet the regulations where it would be mandated.
So it was very, very significant there, near 10,000.
Yeah.
You know, I think the first hearing, or the first time we heard the presentation, was at the Public Works Committee, and then at the public hearing, March 12th, and then 2 public workshops. So I don't really have questions as much as just a few comments. You know, I'm a resident too, so we all bear the responsibility of paying for our water because we all use it. And, you know, it's been said many times tonight, we can't take water for granted. It's a precious commodity. It's like air, except we have to pay for the water. And I just believe we have to do everything that we can to possibly make sure we have it. And of course, that means paying for it. You know, people have battled and gone to war over water for generations. And it's just something, we can't afford to not do this. If we continue to defer maintenance and to put off these projects, we'll find ourselves in a position that will cost residents much more than what we're talking about tonight. And if we ignore those issues, we'll be just looking at significant increases in something that's a lot more painful than what's been discussed tonight. I just want to say again, thanks and support this.
Oh. Thank you very much, Councilmember Elliott.
Thank you very much. And Rosemary Pierce, thank you for all the information you've given. I poured over these documents, the water rate increase, and I also went over Cucamonga Valley Water District's rate increase as well. And one of the differences that I noted between the 2 studies is that the Cucamonga Valley showed the historical costs, and then you could easily compare what the historical costs were to the projected costs. So I put together some information. Carrie, if you could help me by projecting on Schedule A. This is the first one where it shows the revenues from June 30th, 2013 through June 30th, 2017. The top line, line 1, are the revenues that we had for each year. And it projects it.
The visual. Straighten it up.
There we go. Thank you.
So much better.
You can see how the rates, the revenues did increase until 2016, and they dipped a little bit, and then they went back up a little. The expenses were commensurate with the increases proportionately. I added back depreciation. Depreciation is not a cash expense. It's when you take an asset and you amortize it over its useful life. but the asset is purchased and you don't actually pay that 1.7 million for 2013, 1.9 million. You don't actually pay those expenses out. So on line 3, you see the actual cash revenues over the expenses for these 5 years. And as you can see, June 30th, 2016, June 30th, 2017, 4.6 million cash over expenses, 4.8 million cash over expenses for those years. I went then over to see what kind of money was transferred between funds, because this was something that somebody brought up. And in 2013, I'm saying fiscal year ending, that's a lot of words there, but fiscal year ending June 30th, 2013 and 2014, there were 3.8 million and 1.9 million transferred to another fund. And then in those same numbers, there were some money, $500,000 and 0.7 million transferred to the general fund, and those I found in footnotes 3 and footnote 14. On line 5, I went through and I just looked at how much capital improvements were being spent, how much was spent on capital improvements, and we didn't have large amounts of capital expenditures, but we did have between 7.7 million and 1.3 million where we did pay for infrastructure. So I looked at the revenue because I heard people say that the revenues didn't increase like we had expected and that the revenues were even going down, but from what I could tell, the revenues were increasing. So, and these were from the comprehensive audited financial reports. The CPAs go through this and they then attest that these statements fairly present our financial situation. So I guess I on this particular one, I'm just not seeing with all the cash revenues over the expenses why we didn't spend more money on infrastructure.
Maybe Janet, Bill, either yourself or Jeanette can maybe answer that question.
Yes, I would like to pull Jeanette, the assistant city manager, up along with actually Rosemary. This is the first time that staff has seen this. I don't know if Rosemary or Jeanette has seen this particular slide in advance.
Excuse me. You are in a business meeting. Act like an adult.
I am an adult.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm an angry adult.
Pearson, and we can have Pierce chime in as well. But we have Jeanette here who oversees our finance responsibilities and our finance department in the city. And so that's why I'd like her up here to chime in on part of this, please.
Thank you.
So one of the things, and we mentioned it in the presentation, is we're looking at the forecasted expenditures for 2018. That's what's really setting the reins, but it's great to look backwards. So when we take a look at the revenue line that you have, the 21.8 million, if we actually break it down by what the expenses are or the revenues are collected from ratepayers, that's not 21.8 million. This is a one-time revenue sale that we've been able to do. So there's outside rate revenue that's included in that 21.8 million. The expenses of 18.81 million, or 18.8 million, I believe that's correct, but yes, our expenses are going up, and as we pointed out, not included in this number is the $1 million increase from San Antonio Water Company. Again, that's an FY 18 number, and then also not included in this number is the additional 1.4 million or so from Metropolitan Water District. Depreciation, you're right, it's a non-cash expense, but what's not included in here is our capital expenses. And so what we want to do is, yes, we have 18.8 million in operating cash, or operating expenses, or 17 once you deduct out depreciation. But as we've kind of defined moving forward, we want to fund a minimum of $4 million a year in CIP. We've got this $16 million project. Those types of things we're looking to fund. So that's what we're doing in terms of looking forward in terms of having the revenues recover those costs. In terms of what's happened since 2013, we did have those rate increases. So while we did have decreasing sales, you look at the governor called for a drought in April 2015. We lost 36% of our demands, which covers over 70% of our revenues. So we would have seen much more than a 3% decrease in revenues, but it's the ability for the water resources and able to kind of benefit some of that banked water that allows that revenue to be a little misnomer in terms of what's actually in that. But in terms of water sales, actual rate revenue, that number is not 19.3 million from ratepayers. We don't always have the ability to do that water banking program with water sales.
Okay, thank you, Pierce. As far as then comparing our actual expenses to our projected expenses, Carrie, if you can go to Schedule D, that's 4 pages in there. And if you can just adjust it a little bit so people can see what the heading is. On Schedule D, I've taken the expenses from the comprehensive audited financial report in the very first column, and I compared it to the projected cost per the rate study that you did, and you took the rate amounts from our budget. Is that correct? From the budget that we at the City Council had prepared and approved, not prepared, but approved in May of 2017, correct?
The expenses are from the budget, correct?
From the budget, okay, excellent. Now, when we made that budget, we did not actually have the June 30th, 2017 numbers because this was May when we did it. But now we have the June 30th, 2017 actual expenses, and that came to about $17 million. And in your projections, in the rate study, you came to a different, a projected expense of $23 million when you look at all of the operating expenses, and that's a $6 million difference in 1 year. To me, that seems that's a 35% increase from the first year, and that seems that the projection was perhaps not accurate. I mean, not as close as it could have been, and that's not uncommon for projections not to be the same as what it actually occurred. And we know that it would actually be more. But does that 35% increase from actual actually seem like that's reasonable?
So as you said, we were using the budgeted number. A vast majority of that 6,000, so almost 4 million of, or 6 million, so a vast majority, 4 million of it, is coming from our production and storage increases. So that's our increase from San Antonio Water Company, actual versus budgeted. It's the increase of water from Metropolitan, so actual versus budgeted. It's the
Greg's gonna order a pizza.
Water Masters. Our
Right
entire
on.
water portfolio has increased significantly. So a vast majority of that is, of that $6 million difference between actuals and budgeted is
he's gonna come
water
back.
supply increases, and I'll look to Rosemary.
Where's Jean-Pierre?
She went to
and
Ukaipa.
staff to kind of fill in
Hours
the
ago.
remaining 2 million.
Yeah.
I would
But that's
think
from
that
I guess.
the water and storage would be on the CAFR.
What happened with
maintenance
Ukaipa
and
then? Because you said it was the other
That
way?
would be 11.4, and compared to 15.9, that makes sense. I don't see any of the categories that would reflect the same, because we have different names of accounts here.
Really?
We're kind of comparing apples to oranges, but I would think that maintenance and operations, that
Where'd you
would be
find
where
out?
our
Who
cost
told
of
you?
water would be. Am I correct in
She
that?
did? Okay,
Actually,
sure.
our cost
Oh, that's
of
pretty
water is
stupid.
production and storage line item, and our
There's another
transmission
city
and
who did that.
distribution
I'm trying to think of who it was.
Marietta?
is for our mainline
That's not
maintenance that
acceptable.
we do, and
We need to hammer them. I'll go
stuff like
harder.
that. I mean,
I'm still
it's
trying to confirm
our
the
backflow
number.
program, it's
Oh,
our,
okay.
you know,
there.
So let's see what's happening.
pipeline maintenance program, it's our water service lateral replacement programs, things of that nature. So, again, you know, in the projected, June 30, 18, you have the SACO rate adjustment that went into effect July 1. We did have a couple credits that came back from us from SACO because we overpaid in a prior year. And so during that year, we wanted to, or during this current year, we wanted to clear those off the books. So they were credited against water purchases that we had with San Antonio Water Company. But again, the cost of water, it represents what, 45% of our portfolio, something like that. In terms of expenses.
He said
and
no.
as we continue to have dry weather, we're going to continue to use more imported water.
You know what's going to have to happen? Greg,
Okay,
I'm going to have to drop your ass.
On go to Schedule B, that would be the second one there.
Just don't touch me. Don't touch me.
This is where I looked at the reserve balance.
Whoa, too much numbers.
And this will, you actually have to go to 2 pages, so we'll start with this one. This is from June 30th, 2017, the comprehensive audited financial report. And if you look down near the bottom, where you see that little letter
I liked it when people were screaming and yelling.
Yeah, that was good. Under net position,
So people stop screaming and yelling, but I want to make sure that I get the vote when all hell breaks loose, because they're going to vote for this thing. So just bear with
that
me.
would be our unrestricted reserve
That's the
balance.
problem.
And then you go up to my little column where I've done a little bit more, added
This is California, folks, where people fight
I
over
go to
water,
the unreserved balance,
but illegals can pour on in and crap on the floor and have needles and syringes all over the street. But water,
That's the value of our stock in Saco, in West End Water Company. So that's no touchy money. So I subtract out that
No touchy.
23.6 million. That still leaves $8 million at June 30th, 2017 left that is available.
Oh.
Am I seeing something wrong here? Am I
Wow.
missing something?
Oh my God.
Yeah, I'll tell you what's missing, the pizza.
So in terms of the numbers we were provided, through the data request, we requested existing current cash balances related to the water fund. So those
Robin,
numbers were what we were using.
who's the Democrat?
Up to date from
She's the
On the
Democrat,
far right.
and she's the one who's actually the most Republican. Basically, she's the one who's the most Republican, essentially.
reserves in the bank in that designated operating
Yes, I am.
fund. I can't
I'll go off.
necessarily
I'll go
speak
off.
to the
Stored water appears, is stored water included in that?
So,
I don't
Miss
see a
Elliott
specific
is a
line item for
Democrat,
stored water, no.
but it looks like she's going to vote against this
It would
water
be
increase.
inventory. Stored water is there under current inventory. But if you just look at the very top line there, under current assets, cash and investments on June 30th, 2017, $9.8 million. So now you're saying we have $900,000?
Per staff, we have $900,000 in cash related to, that was available in reserves. In terms of unrestricted operating reserve monies, the number was provided by staff.
That seems astronomically different.
This would be the year of great expenses and a lot of projects under the emergency repairs. So there would be a significant difference between a projected end of the year based on all the projects that were planned versus last year's CAFR. So last year's CAFR versus what's current this year, two different things.
Again, that's a lot.
Where did all that money go?
It assumes that you don't do any capital projects whatsoever, so, I mean, I don't think that's appropriate to not do any kind of capital improvement.
So how much did we spend in capital improvements this
We
year?
haven't spent that much this year. We
Oh.
have a number of projects that are just about ready to award. I mean, we're talking about.
Yeah, but what about the year before and the year before?
That will be coming this summer, so they're right around the corner from being encumbered and expended. Those are several $1 million a piece, you know. I mean, and we have other improvements that we need to do these PRV stations, and we need to fix that reservoir at San Antonio Park. So those are projects that are on the forefront that need to be done, are necessary to provide water service to our community.
So you subtracted the cost of those
No.
from? No.
There,
Okay.
well, some planning studies and money are in the budget that you'll see in the approved and adopted budget for capital projects for the utility fund.
Okay, so the next page is Schedule E.
Oh, brother.
And this is from our last financial report dated February 28th, 2018.
I can't read that.
And again, I may be missing something here, but what I did was this represents 8 months worth of cash, revenue and cash expenses. And what I did on this is I annualized it. I took the total amount year-to-date expended, divided it by 8, and multiplied it by 12. Now, this is not going to be totally accurate, but it gives you kind of an idea of how much our revenues are exceeding our expenses so far this year. And our revenues project out about to $29 million based on the $12,500,000 divided by 8 times, well, I'm sorry. Okay, go to the next page, I'm sorry, page 2 on Schedule E. I probably should have been down here talking, going back and forth. On page 2 is where I took the revenues. The revenue was $19.5 million, actual year to date. I divided that by 8 and I multiplied that by 12 to get $29 million. But I know that the hottest months of the year have already passed. So it's not going to be that high, I get it, but we shouldn't be too far off. Then now go back to page 1 where I took the expenses. The expenses of $12.5 million. You divide it by 8, you multiply that by 12, and you get about $18.75 million, $18,750,000. So just based on a cash basis, revenue over expenses, $10,250,000. Now that's not doing any accruals, and you do have accounts receivable, you do have accounts payable, but still this gives you a pretty good idea that so far we're still in the black. So I don't really understand how we're off that much.
If I can interrupt you on revenue over expenses. Actuals through March 30th, it's only $554,000.
Okay, I don't have the March report. The last report I got was February.
Correct. Through March, the actuals, revenue over expenses, the difference, it's only $550,000. It's not $10 million.
And if I may, because there's a large difference here in terms of what we're looking at. So if we can go back to page 2 of 2. And
trauma.
I had the benefit of being able to look at this during the entire meeting. So one thing, and it seems that we can't zoom anymore, but Councilmember Elliott, if you take a look at the third line on that page, you see water sales metered, and that's 15 million. That is our rate revenue. There, if you go 5 or 6 rows lower, you see the line item of lease of stored water of $3.5 million. So that is a one-time revenue. This is what the city's been able to do, the water department's been able to do, is do these large one-time water leases.
So, this came before council just to make sure that we're clear. It came to council when we were working on the emergency improvements for the water system.
I remember that.
In order to develop revenue so that we could fund that program, I recommended that we lease some water, stored water to Fontana Water Company, which we did.
I remember that.
So that we wouldn't be in a very negative position. So, that was my recommendation to council. We did that. We had some expenditures associated, or that revenue has been used to fund some of the expenditures.
So where's all the money?
It's one-time revenue, and it's revenue that goes to fund capital improvements. It doesn't go to fund ongoing operations.
Bell in Upland.
try to live from month to month with one-time money. You know, it's just not appropriate.
And so when we take a look at that, as you stated, we've got about 15 million in metered sales. As this is through February, you know, we've only got a couple more months of revenue. And so really that 15 million is not going to balloon to the same degree that the previous 8 months have provided. And so there is, you know, so we'd only take 8 of, you know, if we wanted to be ultra conservative here, you'd take 8 of that 15 million. And, you know, we're looking at apples to apples here in terms of that, but taking a look at the water sales that we've actually had, you know, we were looking at 18.75 as the estimated, revised estimate. So I think we're pretty on track with that.
Case scenarios, and there might be no need to go with as high of a rate increase as what we're
And if I may, you're correct. We have to be conservative in some of these assumptions. As City Manager Manis mentioned, Prop 218 allows us to set the legal maximum. So this is the maximum that we can charge for the next 5 years. And the reason we look for a 5-year rate program is we want to be able to provide assurances to bondholders, to the EPA, the state, that we can fund these programs, so everyone can kind of budget, those types of things. We do have to be conservative. If we do err on the side of being on the high side, staff or council has every ability to go under those noticed rates and bounce back up to it if they need. So what we're trying to do here is set a rate program that gives you the answers that you need in terms of providing sufficient revenue. We have the tool, extra tool in the toolbox, to use a cliche of my own, for funding drought programs and that in case the miscellaneous revenue comes off. So this is trying to really set the stage so you have the revenue that you need, and if you don't need it down the road, then we don't need that second year of 9, third year of 9. But for the time being, that 17% increase, you do need that for an operations standpoint.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions?
No.
Please, no.
Rosemary, some of us had met with Mr. Driver and we explored, or he shared with us some of the EPA programs.
Same crap happened in Westminster.
Do you have anything to comment on that and how that might work in the future, and why it might not work on the immediate capital improvement project?
Yeah, I mean, I really don't, I have to continue to do a little bit more research on the program that he's referring to. At this point in time, it does appear to me that the SRF loan money that's available.
Is your city council worse than most? I think it's comparable in Torrance. Torrance, they have no backbone. They're just folding over on the district thing too. The pensions eat up $1 out of every 4. 25% of the budget goes to pensions. And the mayor is a demo rat who basically took a bribe to finance an ambulance company, and the city attorney didn't enforce the city codes because the city attorney serves at the pleasure of the city council rather than as a separate elected official, and they're still doing nothing about sanctuary state. So we'd love for you to come down and raise heaven. So
that's why we were very excited about even the one.
Wait, we need pitchforks and torches. We need pitchforks and torches.
Probably 3.5% to 4% money, which would be, another $8 million to the ratepayers probably over the life of that loan.
They don't want to vote.
Again, we're looking for the cheapest solution possible. I mean, the problem is, our cost of water and our cost from as much water as we possibly can out of those well facilities, but the capacity has diminished significantly. A number of them not being online to provide groundwater supplies to us. That's why we need to use imported water sources. I think he made a comment we should divorce ourselves from Metropolitan Water District, and I think Metropolitan Water District is an important source of supply for us, especially during these dry periods when we've already overtaxed our groundwater reserve over several years of dry cycle. I think there's opportunities to drill additional wells to become more resilient and less dependent on imported water. But there's a cost to doing that, and there's cost in this rate study to embark on drilling additional wells for the residents of Upland.
All right, any other questions?
No. No.
All right, so,
No. Uh-oh, here it comes.
I'm happy to make a motion.
All right, if you'd like to make a motion, go right ahead.
I move that we keep the Tier 1 rates at the same rate as we have now, and that we only increase Tiers 2 and 3 by what is being asked, but we keep Tier 1 the same as now. I also propose that we increase the metered rates and we go ahead and include the temporary demand surcharge. So I'm going with everything except Tier 1. I'd like to keep Tier 1 the same and then only increase the other rates.
For clarity's sake, Tier 1 on residential use.
That is correct.
Because everything else has 1 tier.
Right, thank you.
All right, is there a second to that? All right, seeing none, we'll move. Is there another motion that someone would like to present?
Uh-oh. Oh, no. Fireworks.
Rosemary, you look like you wanted to say something.
No.
Oh,
no. Excuse me, we gave you the courtesy. Let's give her the courtesy, please. Thank you.
See how that might impact us financially if Pierce is able to do that. I don't know.
So I think I could run those numbers. I think the greater concern with giving keeping Tier 1 where it is, so a 16-cent discount on Tier 1 would only be a discount, a subsidy to residential customers, single-family residential, and therefore would cause an issue with Prop 218, as it would only be benefiting one class over another. So that was my consternation with that motion.
Okay, Mr. Markman, I think I ran that by you. I asked you if that was something that we could do and stay in compliance with Prop 218. I think you mentioned that would be okay.
No, I don't think we talked about that, but I will say this about it. In 218, if you are not charging the cost, the proportionate cost of running the system and doing all these capital improvements, in other words, if you spent the same amount of money, but you didn't charge one of these classes of residents their fair share of it, you can't pass it on to the other classes of ratepayers. You'd have to take the money out of the general fund, or you would have to cut down the amount of money you were spending. That's the best way I can answer that.
And I guess my thinking is the people that are paying rates Tiers 2 and Tier 3, they're also getting the benefit of Tier 1, the cut in the rates for Tier 1. So I really don't see us passing off any discount to other ratepayers when they as well get the benefit of having the lower Tier 1 rates.
Well, see, it's hard enough to show you never draw any applause. That's terrible.
You're a lawyer, deal with it.
The cost analysis is driven, that's the only reason one gentleman said tiers are tough to justify legally anymore since the San Juan Capistrano case, and that's true. You can't do it to force conservation. That's a social value, just like lifeline rates to senior citizens or low-income families. You can't do that anymore. You can only do it if you want to end up with the same pot of money to spend on the same things. You have to take the money out of the general fund. That's the problem. You can't. In this case, the people in the upper tiers will be paying more than their cost because they're getting increased and the other people aren't, basically. So if you've calculated right in the first place, what drives those tiers is the fact that you've oversized line. You're charging them for peaking, basically, in the summer. So that all your lines are oversized, all your equipment, all your infrastructure is meant to serve water at the peak demand. That's the rationale for the tiers. So if you leave them, push them up higher, they're paying a big chunk more than, even though they get the benefit of being in Tier 1, they're paying a big chunk more percentage-wise than the total cost of driving the system.
Okay, so then maybe mine wouldn't pass the 218 test. Then if we did an overall cut of 80% across the board on all tiers, that would meet the 218 challenge. And cut, I'm sorry, a 20% cut.
So the main consternation with the issue is providing a 16-cent discount to Tier 1.
Right, now let's say we just did a 20% cut across the board on all of the increases. That way there's no particular tier that benefits more than the other. So I'll amend my motion to just cut all of the rate increases by 20%.
Yeah.
Do I have a second? Alright, so seeing none,
Oh, Lord of mercy.
You know, one thing I would like to say on behalf of this whole council, this has not been an easy process for us. We've worked very, hey, give me the same respect, you guys. If you want to get up and talk, I'll give you the same respect. This is getting crazy and stupid.
Yes.
We're all here for the same reason, and the same reason is our city of Upland. Ma'am, I'm sorry, you'll need to have a seat. And we cannot continue to not listen to what everyone has to say.
Ma'am, you have to sit down.
No, you
We've
need
already
to sit
done
down.
our public comment. No, she asked if you could please give her the same respect.
Anyways, ma'am, please have a seat. Thank you. But
Someone's gonna get thrown out.
we have to pay these same rates that you have to pay. You know, I have over a half-acre property too that I'm
And then they
paying
move
these
out the
rates
next
for.
year.
Do I want to pay them? No. But do I want to get a call at 2 o'clock in the morning that Euclid Avenue's got a blowhole in the middle of it and it's shut down for 6 months because we've got to repair
I know
the
about
piping
Simi Valley.
underneath it?
Yeah.
No, I don't want that either. It not only inconveniences the city, it inconveniences you as a resident. So with that said, I'm going to make a motion that we adopt the resolution with the protest count vote to the proposed water rate schedule and adopting revision to the establishing of the multi-year schedules of water and recycle water rates and charge as the temporary need, demand management surcharge rates. And then I'm going to ask if there's a second.
There's a second.
All right, so let's vote. All right, there we go. We will now move on to item number 13, which is our council committee reports.
Do we get to speak on these items?
It was a close agenda.
Yes, Rosemary, as Public Works Chair, I'd like to ask you if you could please give a brief update on our calorie cycle and compliance for commercial and apartments and how the city is meeting AB 341 and AB 1828 requirements for disposal of organic wastes.
Sure. On April 10th, at the Public Works Committee meeting, I brought a report forward to the Public Works Committee members, Carol, Tim, and Sid Robinson, to give them an update
so
on our
there you saw the water vote.
plan
Okay,
for
SB 54 is coming up.
mandatory commercial recycling,
Be back in a few
AB
minutes.
341.